On the morning of March 4th, 2008, 22-year-old Julian Buchwald and his girlfriend, 17-year-old Carolynne Watson, prepared to go out and have a picnic date together. This was a typical date for the couple because they both lived with their parents and they had to spend a lot of time outdoors to get some privacy. Julian's parents owned a massive amount of land, over 1,200 acres in bushland, and the couple often explored the area. They had been dating for only 2 years, but they were both very serious about each other. In fact, they had already decided that they would marry in the future. They even told their local pastor about their desire to marry. They both come from very religious families, and they had met in church. That morning, Julian picked up Carolynne from Churchill, a slightly bigger town with 5,000 residents, and it's a 20-minute drive away. They went back to the property to grab their picnic supplies. They only grabbed lunch supplies of mainly food because they didn't expect to be gone past 3 p.m. But they took Julian's car because the spot they wanted to go to was quite far and next to a waterfall. The drive was uneventful, but Julian spotted the carcass of an animal on the side of the road, and it caught his attention. He pulled over and told her he wanted to take a look. He started walking back towards the carcass and told Carolynne to stay in the car. He disappeared from sight, and Carolynne calmly waited for him. She was quite used to Julian getting distracted by weird things like this, and Julian would often pull the car over to look at various things. However, after 20 minutes, Carolynne began to get worried. Julian had never taken that long before, and she started to debate going outside to see if he was okay. She then looked in the SUV mirror and saw something that would terrify her. There was a figure dressed in all black, with gloves and a hood. It was an unknown man running straight at her car door. Before she could lock the car, he swung the door open and dragged her outside. After she fell to the ground, she quickly was hog-tied. Her mouth was duct-taped, and she was thrown into the back seat of the car. Carolynne couldn't see well, and she just lay there before feeling the SUV moving. SUV again, and she was once more thrown to the ground. Carolynne was so scared and didn't know where she was, except that her surroundings were a dense forest. Her attacker got out a knife and cut all of her clothes off, leaving her naked. She then heard him digging. Convinced that she would be violently murdered, she began to pray. The young couple's absence has been quickly noticed by Julian's parents, who were worried when they were late and not back by 3. Julian's mother began pacing and peering down the driveway to try to see her son's car. As she paced around, she noticed something strange. A glass bottle sticking into the side of a fence. It had a piece of paper inside, and when she opened it and read the note, she quickly became terrified. The note was covered in profanity. Quote, "You blank couldn't leave us alone, so your son and girl went walkabout. You get Carolynne and Julian back when we finish our business in the area, but only if you behave yourselves. Tell everyone that they are on holiday. Don't you dare talk to the cops, and you'll get your kids back. Blink us again, and you'll never see us again, because we'll blink the girl to death and burn her alive. And the boy will really enjoy the sacrifice to our God to pay back the 180 times the hurt he did to us when we picked him up. This is your last warning. Do what we say, and the kids members became known for political extremism and activism, they became quite famous in the news. Since then, they have established branches around the world, and they advise their members to isolate themselves from society. They also preach for its members to commit crimes and show approval for human sacrifices. This last thing generated concern for the current case. There was currently no sign that the cult was in Australia, but people worried that they wanted to start off by entering Australia with a bang. Days went by with no trace of the young couple. They were convinced the couple had fallen victim to foul play, but they were not sure about kidnapping or a cult. Investigators worried that they would not survive in the bushland alone because they only had the clothes on their back and the food they had packed for that day. The temperatures fluctuated wildly from day to night. Poisonous animals, and there was harsh terrain. Over time, police gradually shifted from a mission to find the couple alive to a mission to find their remains. Finally, after 6 days, authorities delivered the news that the couple had been found alive. Carolynne and Julian had stumbled onto a roadway near Alpine National Park and had been picked up by a local farmer. This park was located hundreds of miles away from where they disappeared. It's a 6-hour drive by car. The couple had severe sunburn, blisters, and bruises from their trek through the wilderness. Amazingly, they were physically fine. Police were still worried about the letter and interviewed them about what happened. Carolynne was the first interview, and she wasted no time telling police what happened to her. As she was lying and praying there, the sounds of digging had stopped, and her attacker had walked away, leaving her alone. She tried struggling and couldn't free herself. She knew she was racing against the clock until the man came back. Then she heard Julian's voice screaming out to her. over the course of the days they were in the wild, he kept bringing up the topic, switching between tactics and pestering her with different kinds of manipulation so that she would sleep with him. Julian would do things like tell her that they were about to die and would eventually be married in the eyes of God. He also suggested that getting physical was necessary to keep warm. Carolynne, however, had none of it and stuck to her principles, believing that God would save them. Julian admitted that he had supplies and he actually had a map of Alpine National Park and was never actually lost. He kept walking them in circles, believing he could eventually wear Carolynne down. She believed the entire time that they were being hunted. Julian only led them out of the forest when it became clear that Carolynne was not going to cave in, and he led them out of the forest. After this confession, he was slapped with a number of charges, and in August of 2009, he was convicted of kidnapping and making a false report. Julian was granted bail ahead of his sentencing, and he decided to make one last bid for freedom before his sentencing. He obtained an Indian passport, and he doctored it with his own photo and dyed his hair black, tanning his skin to look Indian. But Julian was a very white guy to begin with, and he had blue eyes. Amazingly, this disguise allowed him to escape Australia, but Indian TSA were absurd.